Right now, as you watch this, your mind is probably running through tomorrow's problems, last week's embarrassments, or imagining worst-case scenarios that will never happen. If you're an American in 2025, you're statistically more anxious, more stressed, and more mentally exhausted than any generation before you. The pressure to succeed, the constant comparison, the 24-hour news cycle, the fear of falling behind. It's not just in your head, it's destroying you from the inside out. And here's what nobody tells you. 90% of your suffering isn't coming from your life, it's coming from your thoughts about your life. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you 7 brutal truths that a Roman emperor discovered 2,000 years ago that can free you from the prison your own mind has built. Much of the suffering we experience originates from conflicts that exist only in our imagination. Our thoughts can damage us far more severely than external circumstances. We spend our days revisiting old errors, creating anxiety about hypothetical futures, and treating ourselves with a harshness we'd never direct toward others. Modern life brings constant overthinking, information overload, achievement pressure, and fear of criticism. The true adversary isn't external, it's the internal voice suggesting inadequacy, impending disaster, and perpetual worry. Marcus Aurelius recognized this reality centuries ago, teaching that we possess authority over our thinking even when circumstances feel overwhelming. If your thoughts have been driving anxiety, pessimism, and self-questioning, now is the time to reclaim control. In this exploration, we'll examine the fundamental truths Marcus believed would liberate you from destructive thought patterns and restore your inherent strength. Most pain originates in imagination before touching reality. Marcus Aurelius grasped something many never fully understand. Thoughts can injure you long before life presents actual challenges. Destructive thinking isn't merely a poor habit, it's an internal assault. You become your own opponent before the world takes any action. When this becomes habitual, you inhabit a battleground existing solely within your consciousness. The human brain naturally amplifies danger, exaggerates possibilities, and constantly searches for potential problems. This served our ancestors facing genuine threats. Today, however, it often creates psychological imprisonment. You analyze conversations repeatedly, imagining hidden criticisms. You envision worst-case scenarios for situations that haven't begun. You assume others think poorly of you without any supporting evidence. The brain constructs narratives based on fear, and the unchecked mind accepts these fabrications as reality. This explains why Marcus emphasized thought mastery. He understood the mind's talent for manufacturing problems within peaceful circumstances. You've likely experienced this: chest tightness, spiraling thoughts, sensing impending catastrophe despite nothing actually occurring. You're engaging in numerous conflicts, with nearly all of them happening entirely in your imagination. The real tragedy isn't life's difficulty, it's your mind convincing you things are worse than they truly are. Destructive thinking becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. When expecting the worst, your nervous system responds as if disaster is present. When you assume people dislike you, your behavior pushes connection away. When you repeatedly think, "I can't," your brain stops seeking solutions. The internal opponent weakens confidence, depletes focus, and contracts your world until you feel imprisoned by your own thoughts. However, Marcus didn't consider you powerless. He believed clarity starts when you distinguish reality from imagination. Exercise the thought distortion audit. When a negative thought appears, don't accept it automatically. Document it. Then ask, is this factual or is fear speaking? What evidence supports this thought? What evidence contradicts it? If someone else presented this thought, would I believe them? This interruption breaks the automatic catastrophizing loop and returns the mind to reason. Eventually, you'll recognize patterns, exaggeration, predicting failure, assuming negative intentions. Once you see these distortions clearly, they lose controlling power. Marcus believed the mind resembles a wild horse, powerful yet dangerous until trained. When you learn to guide thoughts instead of following them, your emotional life transforms. Defeat the internal enemy, and the external world loses power over you. Truth 2. You interpret life more harshly than reality warrants. It's not things that upset you, but your judgment of them. Marcus Aurelius wrote these words centuries ago, yet they perfectly describe modern emotional struggles. Most people don't realize they're far more critical of themselves than others are. They transform neutral moments, harmless comments, or small errors into personal attacks, character flaws, or predictions of failure. The world isn't harming them, their interpretation is. Consider how frequently this occurs without awareness. Someone sends a brief text, and your mind creates a narrative. They're irritated with me. A colleague doesn't smile, and suddenly you believe they dislike you. You make one workplace mistake and interpret it as reflecting your worth rather than seeing it as normal human fallibility. A friend cancels plans, and your brain suggests, they don't value me. None of these are facts, they're judgments, harsh, immediate, and rarely accurate. Humans carry natural negativity bias, but contemporary life amplifies it. Achievement pressure, constant social media comparison, and fear of criticism create a mental environment where minor events feel magnified. It becomes easy to jump to the worst explanation because the mind is conditioned to protect you by assuming danger. But emotional danger rarely represents real danger. Your mind reacts as if casual comments or neutral expressions are threats. You're not responding to life, you're responding to the meaning you attach to life. Marcus Aurelius grasped this deeply. He believed suffering rarely stems from events themselves, but almost always from our judgments about them. Your judgment creates your suffering.
When you judge situations unfairly, you carry emotional weight that was never yours. A harmless error becomes a narrative of inadequacy. A temporary obstacle becomes evidence of doom. A simple misunderstanding becomes a story about your worth. Once this narrative forms, the mind replays it until it feels like truth. Here's the harsh reality. You control meaning far more than you recognize. You cannot always choose what happens, but you can choose what it means. Meaning determines emotional pain. Change the meaning, and the pain shifts. This is why Stoic teachings focus on reframing perception. Perception is the root of emotion. Select one negative event from your week. Document the story your mind created, your initial interpretation. Then force yourself to write 3 alternative explanations. Perhaps the brief text wasn't coldness, they were occupied. Perhaps canceled plans weren't rejection, they were overwhelmed. Perhaps your workplace mistake wasn't incompetence, it was learning. Most situations have multiple possible meanings. Your emotional state depends on which you choose to believe. With practice, this builds a powerful mental habit, not believing the first story your mind tells. The first interpretation is usually the harshest, most emotional, and least rational. The second or third is often closer to reality and far kinder. Life becomes lighter not because events change, but because you stop wounding yourself with judgments that were never true. Change the meaning, and you change the pain. Never let the future disturb you. Marcus Aurelius wrote this reminder that the untamed mind becomes obsessed with forecasting disasters that never materialize. Most destructive thinking doesn't originate from your past or present. It comes from imagination, your ability to create painful futures that don't exist. When you worry endlessly, when you rehearse worst-case scenarios, when you assume everything will collapse, you're not engaging with reality, you're engaging with a hallucination your mind has convinced you is real. Nearly 90% of negative thinking inhabits the future, a place where you have no control, information, or certainty. Yet your brain treats these imagined futures as if they're happening now. This is why your chest tightens, breathing changes, heart races. The body cannot distinguish between real threats and vividly imagined ones. You suffer emotionally and physically because your mind projects danger onto a timeline that hasn't happened and may never occur. Marcus understood this trap profoundly. As emperor, he faced war, betrayal, plague, and political chaos. If anyone had reason to fear the future, it was him. But he approached the unknown with logic, not panic. He believed the future should be prepared for, never predicted with dread. Panic is imagining pain. Preparation is accepting whatever comes with steady composure. One destroys peace, the other strengthens resilience. Here's one of the harshest truths you'll learn. The future has never harmed you. Only your mind pretending to be the future has. Every fear you suffered last year, every catastrophic scenario you rehearsed, every sleepless night worrying about what if, none of those imaginary futures actually reached you. They caused pain without ever becoming reality. You lived through the suffering without living through the thing itself. Overthinking isn't preparation. It's an attempt to control outcomes you cannot control. It's the illusion of safety. The mind suggests that if you worry enough, nothing bad will happen. But worry steals your life twice, once in imagination and once in the exhaustion it leaves behind. You lose days, months, even years fighting battles you never needed to fight. This is why Stoicism emphasizes bringing the mind to the present, the only place where you have actual power. When your thoughts race into the future, pause. Take a slow breath. Feel the weight of your body. Notice what you can see, hear, and touch. Then tell yourself 3 grounding truths. I am here. I am safe right now. I will deal with tomorrow when it becomes today. This ritual interrupts runaway predictions and anchors you in the present. Do this frequently enough, and you retrain your brain to stop jumping into imagined disasters. You reclaim peace, not by controlling the future, but by refusing to be tortured by it. The future isn't the threat. Your imagination of it is. One of the harshest truths Marcus Aurelius understood: you cannot build a stronger mind while clinging to a weaker identity. Destructive thinking doesn't appear randomly. It grows from old stories you tell yourself about who you are. Most people, without realizing it, are deeply attached to outdated versions of themselves. They hold on to identities written during painful life chapters and wonder why their thoughts keep dragging them backwards instead of forwards. Perhaps you've said, "I always fail. I'm not good enough. This is just who I am." Or, "People like me never succeed." These statements feel familiar, almost comforting because they've been repeated mentally for years. But familiarity isn't truth. These old identities often formed during moments of fear, embarrassment, rejection, or childhood insecurity. They were survival stories, not destiny. Yet as you grow, these narratives continue shaping your self-image long after they've stopped being relevant. Marcus Aurelius believed identity is fluid, not fixed, especially when guided by virtue. He never saw people as permanently broken or limited. He believed you become what you practice, pursue, and repeatedly choose. Character is built daily, not determined by yesterday's wounds. But negative thinking tricks you into believing your past is your personality and your mistakes are your identity. This is how the mind traps you, not by attacking you directly, but by convincing you to keep wearing labels you've outgrown. Consider how often your thinking loops back to an outdated version of yourself. You hesitate to take risks because an older version once failed. You avoid new opportunities because an insecure version fears judgment. You downplay your strength because a wounded version felt unworthy. What you call negative thinking is often just an old identity trying to survive. You're emotionally loyal to a version of yourself that no longer represents who you are or who you're capable of becoming. Here's the harsh truth. You cannot heal your mind with the same identity that damaged it. If you continue thinking like the old you, you'll continue living like the old you. A new life requires a new internal narrator. A new direction requires a new self-concept. You don't need a new opportunity, environment, or relationship as much as you need a new internal script, one reflecting the person you're becoming, not the person you once were. Take a blank page and write 10 sentences describing the version of yourself you're intentionally choosing to become. Not the version shaped by fear, failure, or others' opinions. Write the version shaped by strength, clarity, discipline, and virtue. Write the version who handles challenges calmly, thinks rationally, respects themselves, and acts with purpose. This isn't wishful thinking, it's mental training. It gives your mind a new identity to grow into instead of dragging the old one behind you. If you repeat this identity regularly, your actions begin aligning with it. Your thoughts shift, your emotional reactions change, your confidence grows. You realize that the strongest force in your life was never your past. It was the story you told about your past. When that story changes, you change. You cannot think constructively while clinging to a destructive identity. One of the most painful truths Marcus Aurelius taught is also one of the most liberating. You suffer most when demanding control over things that were never yours to command. Destructive thinking often comes from trying to force life into a shape matching your expectations. You want people to behave a certain way, opportunities to unfold on your timeline, outcomes to match your hopes, effort, and plans. But when they don't, the mind spirals into frustration, fear, and self-blame. Here's the reality Marcus understood clearly. You cannot control outcomes, only your effort. Outcomes are influenced by timing, circumstance, others' choices, and forces far beyond your reach. Yet the modern mind, conditioned by perfectionism and pressure, keeps trying to negotiate with the uncontrollable. This negotiation always ends in anxiety. When someone reacts poorly, you think, how do I fix how they see me? When an opportunity disappears, your mind asks, what if I had done more? When rumors or misunderstandings spread, you panic trying to control others' perceptions. But none of these things belong to you. You're trying to rearrange clouds with your hands. Consider how much emotional energy you waste fighting battles that aren't yours. You can't control whether someone respects you, whether a job offer arrives, whether a person tells the truth about you, whether someone apologizes. You can't even control whether people understand you, yet your mind treats all of these as your personal responsibilities. The weight becomes unbearable. Destructive thinking grows from this impossible mission, trying to bend reality into your preferred shape. Marcus Aurelius didn't just intellectually accept limits, he lived them. Despite being emperor, he knew his power had boundaries. He couldn't control generals' loyalty, disease spread, his son's behavior, or battle outcomes, but he could control his judgment, actions, integrity, and response. That's why he wrote repeatedly, almost like a mantra, if it's outside your control, let it go. He wasn't being poetic, he was being practical. Letting go wasn't surrender, it was strategy. It freed him to focus on the only territory where peace and progress were truly possible, his own mind. Whenever your mind starts spiraling, pause and ask, is this within my control? If not, why am I trying to control it? What action within my control can I take right now? This framework cuts through mental noise with surgical precision. It exposes how much suffering comes from grasping at things you cannot hold. It redirects attention from fear towards agency. Most importantly, it teaches your mind to conserve energy for what truly matters. When you stop negotiating with what you cannot control, your nervous system relaxes, your thoughts quiet, your emotional world becomes lighter. You stop chasing impossible responsibilities and start living with clarity instead of chaos.
Peace begins when you stop negotiating with the uncontrollable. One of the most misunderstood ideas in modern self-help is the obsession with positive thinking. People are told to constantly replace every negative thought with a cheerful one, as if repeating happy phrases could magically erase internal storms. But Marcus Aurelius never taught positive thinking. He taught something far more powerful, demanding, and transformative: emotional discipline. Here's the harsh truth. You don't need to think more positively. You need to respond more wisely. Positive thoughts are optional. Emotional discipline is essential. Marcus faced war, betrayal, illness, loss, and the weight of ruling an empire. He didn't survive because he convinced himself everything was wonderful. He survived because he refused to let emotions dictate his actions. Stoicism has never been about suppressing or denying feelings. It's about creating space between your emotions and your response. When you master that space, negative thinking loses authority over your life. Destructive thinking destroys
you, not because thoughts are inherently true, but because you believe them the moment they appear. You feel anxious and assume something is wrong. You feel doubt and assume you're incapable. You feel discouraged and assume your efforts are pointless. Emotions are meant to be signals, not commands, but most people confuse the two.
Marcus understood this deeply. Emotions are visitors. Actions are identity. The key is learning to observe feelings instead of obeying them. The next time you feel a surge of fear, irritation, shame, or self-criticism, don't react immediately. Pause. Breathe. Create a tiny pocket of stillness between the emotion and your response. In that 5-second window, ask yourself, is this emotion guiding me or misleading me? Does this feeling reflect reality, or is it just a momentary wave? What action aligns with the person I want to be, not the emotion I feel right now? This tiny pause rewires your relationship with your inner world. You begin seeing emotions as weather patterns, temporary, shifting, and not worth reorganizing your life around. You stop spiraling into negative thinking because you stop giving thoughts unchecked power. You start acting from clarity rather than confusion, from intention rather than impulse. Over time, emotional discipline becomes a form of strength that no mood, setback, or fear can penetrate. You realize calm doesn't come from avoiding difficulty, but from meeting it with steadiness that emotions cannot shake. Peace is not an emotion, it's a skill. Marcus Aurelius understood a truth that modern science continues to confirm. Your thoughts shape your identity, behaviors, and ultimately your fate. Every thought you repeatedly entertain becomes a seed. Plant it once and it may fade. Plant it daily and it grows roots. Allow it to grow long enough and it becomes the lens through which you interpret your entire life. This is why people who think anxiously become anxious, people who think fearfully become fearful, and people who think small begin living small. Here's the harsh truth most people avoid. You're digging your own psychological trenches with every negative thought you let repeat unchecked. One pessimistic prediction may seem harmless. One self-criticism may feel insignificant. One moment of doubt may feel normal. But repetition transforms a passing idea into a belief, and a belief into personal identity. The mind becomes a self-reinforcing loop. You think negatively, you feel negatively, and then you act in ways that create negative outcomes, which reinforce the original thought. The trap closes without you noticing. Marcus Aurelius refused to let his mind drift aimlessly. Every morning, he trained his thinking the way a soldier trains their body, intentionally, repeatedly, and with discipline. He treated the mind as a muscle, strong when used correctly, weak when neglected. His morning reflections weren't poetic rituals, they were psychological conditioning. He understood that if he didn't direct his thoughts would direct him. Each morning, before your phone, before the world enters your mind, repeat 3 intentional statements designed to reset your mental trajectory. I choose the thoughts that guide my day. I control my mind. It does not control me.
Today, I act from clarity, not fear. These aren't empty affirmations, they're strategic commands. They redirect your mental momentum before old patterns take over. If you truly want to change your life, you must begin by changing what you allow your mind to rehearse. Each repeated thought is a vote for the person you're becoming. If you don't choose those thoughts with intention, your mind will choose them for you, and it will always default to fear, doubt, and limitation. Train your mind, or it will train you into misery. The 7 harsh truths you just learned were never meant to wound you. They were meant to free you from the battles your own mind has been creating. Every insight we explored points back to one central reality. Most suffering begins in the mind, not in the world. Your interpretation matters more than the event. The futures you fear are illusions. The identity you carry can always be rewritten. You cannot control everything, but you can control your response. Emotional discipline outweighs emotion itself, and what you repeat, you eventually become. Tonight, don't try to change everything. Choose one truth, just one, and practice it intentionally. True transformation isn't a single breakthrough moment. It's the discipline of guiding your mind day after day, thought after thought. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Share in the comments which truth resonated most strongly with you and how you plan to apply it. I'll be reading every response. I'll see you in the next video as we continue this journey into the strength, clarity, and peace that Stoic philosophy can build within you. Master your thoughts, and you master your life.